Hello, my name is Dr. Carl Candlepun, and this is the 18th official episode of my Lost podcast. As such, it features spoilers for up to and including Season 1, Episode 18, Numbers. It features no spoilers beyond this point in the show. However, if you have not seen at least to this point in the series, I highly encourage you to do so first before proceeding with this podcast. But without further ado, let's begin. Hello, and welcome to Dr. Candlepun's Lost podcast. I am Christopher Huth, otherwise known as Dr. Candlepun.
And I am Michael Huth, also known as Safety Officer Flickerson.
And today we are here to talk about Season 1, Episode 18 of Lost, Numbers. Well, I guess I'll start with the big question. Do you agree with Hurley's interpretation of the numbers?
Them being cursed?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had forgotten until I think maybe the first thing was that his grandpa kind of died when they were doing the news thing. And that was the next thing that kind of hit me like, well, wait a second, did some bad stuff start happening? And then, of course, it kind of went to fast forward with some of those in the flashbacks. And I didn't really know what to think, but it was easy to draw that conclusion like, yeah. And then when he went and visited the guy in the mental institution, that threw me for a loop. I don't recall remembering that, but when that guy freaked out when he told him that and started saying the stuff he was saying, like that made it seem even more weird to me. Like it caused some more questions.
Yeah.
That I'm like, man, I don't remember how this turns out. I don't know what to think.
Did you remember that Hurley had been in a mental institution at some point?
No, I didn't remember that either.
Did you? It's another weird thing with the way I originally watched it, where like I hadn't seen this episode until I owned the DVD, and so like I had found out about Hurley by watching like the recap before season 2 started. There's like an hour-long recap. Then I watched the season premiere of season 2, and it comes up that he had been in a mental institution. So basically, I knew before the first time I watched this episode. But I like watching it and being like, oh, it's kind of cool how they. They hint at it a little bit in the news interview because he's saying that he recently put his family through a lot. And then when he's at the desk of the place, you don't really know where he's at first.
Yeah.
It's when the doctor's like, hey, how you doing? There's that shot that like perfectly frames it where the sign says psychiatric admittance, like right there. It's like, oh, okay. Any ideas, or I'm assuming you don't have any recollection. So any theory on why Hurley would have been institutionalized?
My thought process leans toward, well, no, that just wrecks that. I'm getting that in reverse order. I was thinking it was because of all of the calamities due to the numbers, but clearly that wouldn't match for chronological reasons. So, no, yeah, I can't come up with anything.
Okay, just another mystery that they've added to the book. Well, so circling back to my question though, because like the whole episode, it's like Hurley's just trying to find somebody that agrees with him. Like he sees things this way, he believes what he believes. Nobody can acknowledge and respect that, and finally he finds it in Rousseau on the island. I feel like the way the episode presents it from his point of view, and it isolates these very specific things, it seems to paint a pretty clear picture of why somebody in that situation would believe that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what always gets me about the topic of luck is just how subjective it is. Because the wife of Sam Toomey in Australia, she talks about getting in that car accident and she lost her leg. Some people might read that as pretty lucky. Like if you got in a really bad car accident and you lost your leg, like that sucks, but you survived this really horrific accident. And I feel like you could do that with a lot of things, like Charlie crossing the bridge. The bridge collapsed when Charlie went across, but he survived that. Like he escaped falling to his death. So I guess that's what I'm like throwing out there is like, I guess the best way to ask it is like in real life, like do you put any thought into?
Yeah, from a religious standpoint, I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason, and you could go not that this is religious, but the whole butterfly effect, right? Yeah, all of that. And I think part of it is just looking at things from the perspective of like, everything does have a reason. You might not understand it. You may never get to know the why all the time. But take for instance, all the stories of there's one, and I'll butcher it, but a church that always gathered for choir practice, always gathered for choir practice at the same time. The pastor, there's a night in which a series of reasons, people falling asleep and not hearing their alarm. The pastor went and turned on the furnace, but had to run back home to get his wife, who was also in the choir. All of these things happened where none of them were on time, and the church blew up. There's a gas leak, and it blew up. If they would have been there when they were supposed to be, the majority of the church, all the choir, the pastor's wife, they would all be dead.
Yeah.
Arguably speaking. And so it doesn't matter whether you can't find your keys or you're running 5 minutes behind, and not like you're going to hop on and look for all these bad things that happen. But I mean, we've been on vacation before, driving down the road, and then we get sit still traffic. We're sitting still traffic, and we took longer at the gas station. And when you find out why you're sitting still, it's because there's been a terrible accident on the highway. Well, maybe if we hadn't been longer at the gas station than we wanted to be, maybe we would have been involved in that accident. So there's always that. So when I think about that all the time, I do have that faith and that belief that we're all exactly where we're supposed to be in this world, where God wants us to be. When I look and I apply that from the other side, playing the devil's advocate, if you will, when people just go, yeah, things happen, it's by chance and all that. I get where they might want to believe that. So if you're looking at that, those two ends of that spectrum, what changes anything is the context. So in Hurley's case, like you said, whether they presented it as such on purpose, and it's not really that, these things are happening in a fairly condensed period of time, or at least it leads you to believe a fairly condensed period of time. And I think it's that condensing of time and the buildup of incident after incident after incident, that no matter what your belief is, spiritual or otherwise, you're kind of like, if it's spiritual, you're like, all right, the demons are after me. Like something is going on here, because and then of course they seem to start with the winning of that lottery and the using of those numbers for Hurley in this case. So I completely get why he thinks it's not crazy for him to think that way.
Right.
The way it's presented, I don't think he's crazy for thinking that
Right.
way. I also completely understand the way that everyone else would be dismissive, because that's the other thing about human nature, and I'll shut up. But the idea that I've been around people like this, that, they can have a hangnail and it could be the worst thing that ever happened to them. They could talk about it for half a work day. It's like, oh, the pain, I'm miserable. I can't do this, can't do that. And you could tell them, like, I was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And those same people be like, you'll be fine. It was like, oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting too, and kind of human nature. If you're not involved in it, if you're not suffering from it, it's real easy to come up with a simple solution, or it's not that big of a deal.
Well, so there's so much that I want to respond to there, and I'm certain I'm going to forget some of it. You said the thing about the condensed time, so I did want to point out that he says, it's right before Russo starts shooting at them. Charlie's asking him to like tell him what's going on, and Hurley starts to say about a year ago, and then the shooting starts. So you can get from that it was about a year earlier that he won the lottery. So those flashbacks that you're seeing are basically approximately over the course of a year. But to get back to what you were saying about like context and like the story you told about the church blowing up, like you imagine the things that were happening to those people that day to make them run late. I imagine at least some of them were probably like, man, my luck today, like I'm having really bad luck, losing my car keys, getting a flat tire, I'm not going, whatever it is. And then, oh wait, like turns out that was actually good luck. It's funny how you can add the context, and it completely changes that. And that's part of why I wanted to talk about this, is because again, when you're shown a very specific set of things, and you're seeing how this person interprets it, who's to say that with enough more information, that person and the audience might not change their perspective on it. There's actually a really good, so Damon Lindelof's other show, The Leftovers, one of his other shows, the third episode of the series, I know you probably don't have the time, but at some point in your life, you should really watch the show. I think you'd love it. But the third episode is focused on this preacher. The whole thing, like it's an hour-long episode, and like he keeps running into things that like, it's like, oh, this is really bad luck. But then it's like, oh, but then it leads to this. It's like, okay, well, no, this is good luck, and then that leads to something bad. And it's just, the whole episode is like exploring this guy's faith and why he reacts to each of those things the way that he does, and the value and maybe even the peril to some extent of that perspective. But even by the end of the episode, he's in a certain place, but that's not the end of it. Like, the series is going to go on, and it's like, okay, well, this could continue turning good and bad. It's sort of, to me, it comes down to pessimism and optimism, or faith, and having faith that in the grand scheme, the net balance is positive. Like, to me, that's the thing that's worth having faith in, regardless of God or the universe or any conscious force being behind it. What I definitely agree with is that everything happens the one way.
Yeah.
And nothing good that we have today would exist without everything bad that happened preceding it. You go back and change one of those things, the butterfly effect, like you said, it would wipe out the good. This might be a big jump, but because we're talking about luck and the subjectivity of that and the belief in it, I like the whole Locke and Claire thing in this episode, and the culmination of that is, before he reveals that he was building her the crib, the culmination is he talks about their birthdays being close together and that being good luck. And she asks, "Oh, you believe in that?" He says, "I believe in a lot of things." And to me, the cool thing about including that in this episode specifically, where Hurley's just so obsessed with this bad luck as he sees it, you have Locke on the other end, like saying, "I believe in a lot of things. I believe in luck and in good luck." Just having that mindset of like, oh, well, this arbitrary thing, and like, I'm going to choose and read that as being responsible for all this good stuff that is going to happen. Yeah. And just believing that, regardless of whether or not that's ever going to be provably true. I don't know. It is the small little thing that I like that they included.
In that scene where he's asking her for help, I have no reason why, other than the times that Locke's creeped me out and he's untrustworthy. In that moment, I allowed myself to think he was setting her up to take her into the woods to have her taken again. I don't know where that thought came from, but I literally he's setting her up. I don't remember it, but I bet she gets taken again. And it's like, I'm not even on the island, and this dude can't, outlive my judgment. And here he is, as it's presented, doing probably one of the more thoughtful things that, or I guess, no one could think of it being anything other than thoughtful, things that he's done since he's been on the island. I think he's done plenty of thoughtful things. I think it escapes a lot of people, but
yeah, I think it was Drew, the first time viewer Drew, way back towards the beginning of the season, saying like that he kind of viewed a lot of what Locke was doing, like even the good stuff, like getting Charlie off of the heroin, as like trying to win people over to his side, or winning hearts and minds, as we later talked about it. You could view that as part of what he's doing here with Claire. The lottery woman, the woman that reads off the numbers on the TV, did you recognize her at all? I would have been shocked if you did, but she's been in the show before recently.
Oh, man. No.
So, do you remember in Sawyer's episode 2 weeks ago, his first flashback, he's getting to the hotel room with the woman, and then that guy sitting there in the dark, and he tells her to go and he'll find her. That was her.
That was the news anchor lady reading off the lottery.
Yeah, the lottery lady was who Sawyer was hooking up with in that episode.
Wow, talk about lucky. Read off winning numbers, and she avoided having sex with Sawyer. That lady needs to buy a lottery ticket.
And then, did you catch when Hurley's meeting with his accountant? He's talking about some of the companies that Hurley owns. Did any of those ring a bell?
No, I guess not.
I forget exactly what the accountant says, but he mentions a box company in Tustin.
Yes.
And Hurley's like, I own a box company? He goes, yeah, they manufacture boxes.
Yeah.
And you remember that's where Locke worked. Locke
yes.
says he was a regional collections manager for a box company.
That's right.
Yeah, and then he was from Tustin. So yeah, just more character connections. Well, continuing on, so I'm pointing out Easter eggs and stuff. This episode, it reveals these numbers, which if you don't have them memorized now, I was going to say I suspect you will at some point, but knowing you and your memory, maybe not. But they have already appeared a ridiculous amount from the beginning of the like from the pilot to now.
Yeah.
Some of the bigger examples. Locke was in a wheelchair for 4 years. Rousseau's transmission was playing for 16 years. the flight number was 815. 4850, so 815 are two of the numbers, 815. The safety deposit box where the plane was in case flashbacks was 815. Jack was in row 23 on the plane. The reward money that Kate got turned in for was 23,000. Claire was 8 months pregnant. Every episode there's at least a couple
some
of
reference.
Like, yeah. And it's like the last thing as far as like pointing out like Easter eggs is the ways in which it's been foreshadowed that Hurley was a lottery winner or rich in some way, is all of the money that he owes Walt through backgammon. And you remember in the first episode, you see them playing backgammon when Hurley's walking away. And Walt's like, you owe me however much money. And he's like, you'll get it. Yeah. It's like he actually has it. Or even like when he builds the golf course, he says rich idiots fly to private islands all the time to play golf. And it's just funny. It also explains why he was on the TV in last week's episode. You remember he's on the TV. We did talk about that, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
So okay, yeah. So somebody was filming him, like probably as some little thing on like lottery winners or like what they did with the money or who knows. But it makes sense now. Like why would he have been remarkable enough to have been featured on a TV thing?
I don't remember everything that happened when Saeed was with Russo and she was kind of giving him background on her people, and we've suggested that they, were losing their mind, whether she put him down, whatever happened, right? Got some sickness, whatever it was. But when she's talking to Hurley, she gets a little more detailed about how they ended up on the island.
Mm-hmm.
And so she talks about being on that research vessel, them hearing those numbers come across the radio, them deciding to search, for the source of them, wrecking onto the rocks on the island, going onto the island, and then eventually tracking it all the way to this radio tower, sorry, where Hurley's like, oh, there's a radio tower on the island. She's like, yeah, and that's where the numbers were coming from, and then that's when she changed it to her message, if you will,
after the
yeah. And so
and she says it's by the Black Rock, which she mentioned. Just to recap, in case you don't remember, the first time we heard her say those words was in that episode where we meet her. When she's talking about when her team got infected, she says they were coming back from the Black Rock.
Which I really don't recall any reference or have any idea what the Black Rock is, or it's just, a Black Rock formation or whatever. But her saying that obviously gives now Hurley, so two people, arguably, a reference on the island. And now, even though Saeed didn't get the radio tower piece, I don't believe she spoke about that specifically to him. She did to Hurley.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up because this is the first time we learned that there's a radio tower on the island.
There you go.
So was there more that you're going to say about that?
No, just interesting because it's like, maybe in that moment it doesn't mean anything to Hurley. I have no doubt it's going to come up in conversation at some point. It's going to lead to potentially Saeed's going to want to find that radio tower because he's probably going to have a belief, man, if I get the radio tower, I could probably switch that message or get a message out. Something along those lines. So,
I mean, it's certainly possible that could happen story-wise. But what I would want to point out when that happens, if that happens, I'll go ahead and point out now. If nobody has heard her transmission, what would make Saeed think that changing it, unless there's some other technical thing he could do?
That was my thought. Is that's his wheelhouse. So maybe he thinks that, you know what, maybe the signal wasn't boosted enough to get out into the shipping channels, and I can do this, or I can, get some resources, boost this signal, gets out to his shipping channels, and then maybe a boat picks it up. Obviously, their boat picked it up at some point. So,
well, so and that's the great transition to that part of this that I want to talk about. You caught that Leonard in the mental hospital. Well, actually, no, I'm trying to remember if it was him or if it was the wife. One of them says that it was 16 years. Yeah, I think it was the wife. That it was 16 years ago. They actually heard something all of a sudden. They never heard anything, and it was those numbers. It was that transmission, and then it went away. It's interesting that was 16 years ago. Russo crashed on the island 16 years ago. It would seem that they heard it at the same time.
Yeah.
So it seems worth noting that for some reason that transmission became audible to the outside world at that time. And as far as we know, it never did. It certainly doesn't seem to have before that.
Yeah.
The years before that, because they never heard anything. Anyways, it seemed possible Like we didn't know where Russo and her team were headed on their research mission. It seemed possible that they were actually looking for this island, and that was, you know, where they were going to conduct whatever research they were going to conduct. This episode seems to definitively prove they weren't looking for this island.
Yes.
Um,
This island was looking for them.
yeah. Now I say seems to because I mean it's possible they could have been looking for the island, not knowing where it was. Then they heard that transmission and was like, "Oh, this could be where we're looking for, what we're looking for." What do you think that it means that there's a radio tower on this island?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said it before, but it seems like this island is drawing people in, and not just any people. We don't know the backstory of Russo and her team of researchers, right? But we are slowly but surely getting the backstory of all of the characters on the plane that are left here on the island, and in their flashbacks, we're seeing, you know, their paths crossed. At least there's some type of a connection there. So I just have this feeling that there's something going on with the island. The island is bringing in what it needs, you know, to continue to feed itself, whether that's a research thing, whether that's the monster thing, whatever that is. It seems like it's controlling and bringing in people and changing their destinies, or bringing them to their destinies, whatever that may be.
But what does that have to do with the radio tower?
That's its way of kind of pushing those numbers out there, or pushing out the curiosity to you know, get people that are in the vicinity kind of on the island, so to speak, whether it's the plane crash or it's the boat crash. Or
Well, so digging into that, are you suggesting that the island manifested this tower? I don't know, like the way Walt may or may not be able to manifest things into existence.
Yeah.
Or do you think somebody built it? Because what you said could still be true while also like...
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, for all I know at this point, the island doesn't show up on any maps, and it's a figment of everyone's imagination, but somehow they interact with it. I don't know. Like, yeah. Nothing seems off the table for me at this point with the, I don't know, I guess supernatural side of what's happening.
Metaphysical.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. The metaphysical.
Well, and so along those lines, the ending of the episode, you see that the hatch has the numbers. Yeah. If we assume somebody built that hatch, there's the question of why are those numbers put on there. Same way there's the question of why were the numbers being broadcast on that loop? Why these numbers? Or yeah, I mean the thing that you just said, like, is this a weird situation where, you know, we see that Walt is seemingly manifesting things into reality? Is it happening to some extent with all of the characters? Is Hurley's obsession with the numbers perhaps manifesting them onto the hatch? I mean, that doesn't really track in regards to the radio transmission, because that was 16 years ago, long before he ever heard them. But yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting.
Well, and also, I won't get it exactly right, but when he's talking to the guy in the mental institution, and he says something about, you know, when he's going off about him using them to play the lottery, I think he says something to the effect of like, you opened the box.
Yeah. Yep.
And so like, my mind goes to, he's talking about Pandora's box, right? Like, I don't know what else he'd be talking about, but if he's not talking about Pandora's box, what box is he talking about? And, you know, and even if he is talking about Pandora's box, how does he know that? Like, he heard these numbers when he was in the Navy. How does he know, other than, you know,
these bad things happen to my friend?
These bad things, yeah.
Which, I'm glad you said that, because yeah, it's like, we hear the story of Sam Toomey and what happened to him, and you know how that ended with him killing himself. But surely there has to be more to why Leonard is repeating them nonstop and in a mental institution because of them. Like, surely it's not because, oh, my friend went through all this stuff. It almost seems like something must have happened with him as well.
Yeah. Like maybe he got, once he heard the story of the numbers from his friend, he felt compelled to use those numbers in some way, and decided he wasn't, knowing what happened to his friend, and that's what's causing his mental problems. Is he's got this draw to use the numbers for something, especially maybe beneficial, and he's keeping himself from doing it, but it's causing this internal dialogue and internal issue that's making him have to reside in the mental institution. Or maybe he wants to pretend he's mental to stay in there so he can't use the numbers. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, arguably, if that's his way of doing that, I would argue that his psychotic break is real. Like, if that's the solution for him is to pretend to be psychotic, I think he is psychotic.
It's working.
I mean, it could be. I mean, it could just be, because we talked about, if this curse is real, it's negatively affecting everybody around him. Like, maybe that's just like, maybe the guy just became fixated. Maybe he had some kind of schizophrenic condition that latched onto these numbers. And
the thing that makes me wonder is he's sitting there when Hurley first starts talking to him in the way that he's mumbling and doing whatever. It's almost like he's non-communicative. He's not really actually answering any questions. He's not speaking anything.
He doesn't seem to be particularly loose.
Right. And then as soon as he finds out Hurley does that, like, it sounds like he's normal. Like, he's like, oh, you did this or another. Like, wait, who's this dude?
Yeah.
And so that's what made me wonder, is like, is this just a ploy? And now he's so upset. He's like, I can't even act crazy right now because I can't believe what you've done.
Yeah. I did have one more small thing before we move into our fan mail section. And yeah, the small thing is basically the progress that they're making on the Raft 2.0. Sun asks Kate, the fact that Jen's helping out with this, like, she's asking Kate if she thinks that Jen's going to go with them. Had that thought crossed your mind prior to her saying that?
I put zero thought into it,
okay.
Right? And matter of fact, when Jen asked that question, I thought it was sophomoric. Sun too, yeah. When Sun asked that question about Jen, I thought it was sophomoric, because it's like, what are you in high school again? Wondering if your boyfriend's going to break up with you? Like, I mean,
he arguably already did, but
right. That's my point. Like, why would you ask a somewhat rhetorical question to somebody who would have less knowledge than you would? Right? You're all sitting there watching him. Things that you do know. He doesn't like Michael. Him and Michael don't get along, or at least Michael believes he doesn't like him, and they both have reasons not to like one another, even if it might just be a communication issue. And all of a sudden he's helping build this thing with a purpose. Yeah, I think one could draw the conclusion, if they had just said it's too late and they start building the raft, that they might have plans on heading out without you. But yeah, I thought it was kind of a weird interaction, or a weird, kind of question to ask Kate. But then again, I guess Kate's a bit of a lever, maybe. Maybe she's like, oh, you know better than anybody. I don't know if she knows that about Kate.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I'm reminded of our conversation about Jen asking Sun what she thought about if Claire's baby was okay the night Claire came back. And we talked about how, like, there's no reason that Sun would actually know any better than he would.
Right.
But, like, he's looking for some kind of comfort, it seems.
Yeah.
Like he is genuinely concerned. He's asking for her opinion. Maybe he thinks that, like, she has some other intuition that he doesn't as a woman. Yeah. So, I mean, I would argue the same, or the similar type of thing with Sun asking Kate is, she's looking for comfort. I'm sure she's reaching the same conclusion as you just laid it out. I mean, the fact that she's asking the question shows that she is. But, like, maybe Kate's gonna come up with something like, "Oh no, I'm sure he's just trying to make it up to Michael or something." Yeah, I don't know, but, like,
I've been left a lot. Doesn't look like this.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, that's, now that Sun has pointed it out. Now that you've laid it out the way that you did, like, yeah, I mean, it does seem like, because Jen and Michael don't get along, and Michael had just beat the shit out of him that same day, for Jen to then show up and be like, "Boat." Like, I'm helping now.
We're doing this.
I would agree that it insinuates that he is trying to be part of it.
I think another issue, this whole raft, that I just want to bring up is there's been plenty of clear weather, sunny skies, if you will, probably see decent distance, nautically speaking. They've not seen an ounce of life, right? They haven't seen a boat. They haven't seen... any smoke coming from a large boat. I don't know, no aircraft. And I know they know where they took off from, but I don't think they have any reference for how far away they are.
They have a reference for how far, but they don't know in which direction. Because they said that, I think it was about 6 hours into the flight, they lost communication. The pilot turned around to head for Fiji. So I guess that gives you a general direction.
Okay.
And he says that they were 1,000 miles off course by the time they crash. Because I think he said it was they were flying 2 hours in the
gotcha.
So somebody like Saeed could probably do some
A little
calculating,
bit of triangulation, yeah.
yeah, and get a rough estimate of where they're at.
I guess my point is what are your hopes with this raft? Like, you're gonna get out in the open ocean, and let's just assume Saeed's got, you know, some Navy about him, and he's like, okay, we need to get to this certain point. We'll catch a wave, so to speak, and we'll drift through the channels and be pushed off toward some other landmass, right? Trying to figure out how many days you'd be at sea without an engine, for instance, right? Trying to drift in the right directions and everything else, or sail. I assume that would be their ultimate goal, to aim themselves. How much rations you're going to need, what you're going to need to do that. They haven't even started securing those things to get on this raft to go. And so anyway, it's not worth probably wasting much time thinking, but that's where my mind goes, right? There have been people dead at sea in shorter periods of time, you know, with probably shorter distances to go because they were ill prepared.
So your point with all this is you think the raft is a very bad idea.
Yeah, I'm not getting on that raft. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not getting on that raft. Like, I've seen things I can eat. I've got water. Yeah, I'm not getting on that raft.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even watch Shark Week, and I ain't getting on that raft. Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem like a really big gamble, and it's you know, I get Michael's desperation of not wanting his son to grow up, and him feeling the need to do something, and like, I feel like if you're one of the people waiting to see if the raft can bring back help, you're like all for it.
Yeah,
but
yeah, especially if you don't like some of the people getting on that raft, like,
yeah, but yeah, like, to bring your son on that raft, that does seem like a questionable decision.
I didn't even go there, but I'm gonna go there right now. That's a whole other animal. You know how many adults you could watch suffer and die in a pinch if you're all in the same boat? No pun intended. Then watching your kid go through that, who doesn't have a fully developed brain, who doesn't have the life experience you have, who might not be as ready to meet their God. Yeah, that's a tough sell.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people haven't mentally prepared for that.
Yeah. And so it'll be interesting to see how much of that comes up.
Yeah.
In between now and whether or not they set sail, and who all is actually on the boat or on the raft. Because hopefully Michael's at least considered that.
There's the idea as well. They don't even know how big this island is. But there's another piece about when you get to a point where you don't necessarily have any belief that you're going to get rescued anytime soon. Mm-hmm. There comes a point in which you probably start getting around this island and getting to where you can get during the day and get back. And then you find a point in which, we'll camp here for the night, and then we'll pick up and have some checkpoints. But you essentially map out that island to see where your resources are at. Hey, we're going to be here for a while. Hey, it turns out there's some pineapple trees, 20 clicks that way. But I guess the argument to that would be they've been attacked already. They know there's a monster or something, lurking in the. I mean, I'd stay on the beach, but whatever. Well, just the idea that there's reasons, I guess, that make sense in this plot line for them to not want to explore too much of the island, but at the same time, I would really want to map that sucker out and see what my resources were.
Well, keep in mind that that's exactly what Saeed was going to do.
Yes.
When he initially ran into the French woman. And then since then, he's been extremely reluctant to go back out there for some reasons that are more explicit than others. But I think this episode makes a decent case for part of why he may have been reluctant, and that is the booby traps.
I mean, you get taken hostage once and you wuss out. I don't know.
Yeah. But by someone that's not even as hostile as these alleged other people are.
Yeah.
Again, assuming Ethan wasn't alone and assuming they're all the same temperament as him.
Right. Ethan actually took somebody and attempted to kill Charlie, whereas Russo looked like she would in a pinch kill somebody, but when the opportunity came, she passed.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, yeah. So because even when they're asking Saeed at the beginning of this episode, like take us out there, and then Hurley's asking about the cable, and he's like, but then that led you to her, though, right? He goes, no, it led me to one of her traps,
which technically led Hurley to another one.
Well, exactly, and that's actually part of the fan mail that I want to get into.
Sorry.
Well, no, that's it's a good transition, but I'm trying to make sure there wasn't something else I was going to say about that. Well, just I'm responding to why so far nobody's
Yeah.
tried that again. And yeah, I guess just nobody has found it worth the risk at this point. You would probably want to go with more than one person. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to do it the way that Saeed did it.
I think for me too, I would start with the exterior. I mean, I would just start walking the beach. When I ran out of beach, where I had to climb up a bluff and back down, like as close as I could stay to the water. I'd
Yeah.
want to know. I'd want to know the circumference of that island.
Which was also his plan. He said he was going to walk the coastline.
Yeah.
And it was only because he found the cable that he went in the jungle.
In.
So yeah, I mean that's a good point. Maybe that's something that should be revisited. Is at least just doing the coast at the beginning of the episode as well. Saeed's saying that on the map, like she's marked this whole section of the island as dark territory.
Yeah.
And he's like, does that really sound like a place you want to go? And then just adding in, I don't know how much he believes of her story that the team got sick, but I mean, it's just like, I don't know. It does seem like there are a lot of reasons you may be apprehensive to go out there. Like you said, the monster,
Yep.
these other people that may or may not exist, this sickness that may or may not exist. Like it just, if you're doing well enough over here and you're not running into a whole lot of issues, and you're not running out of resources as far as like fruit and fish, like it seems like they're doing all right. And keep in mind, it's still only been slightly over a month, like since they actually crashed. Like they haven't been there that long. But so now that we've been talking about the cable and the traps, that brings me to the one comment I want to address in our communications from the outside world segment. This one actually, it's an interesting situation because this is a comment left by Time Gentleman or Ben Ward. He left this comment on my spoilery discussion of the 9th episode, which was the episode where Saeed met Rousseau, and we learned a lot about her backstory, and we first saw the cable and all that. He left that comment on that, and then I responded to it already on my spoilery discussion of episode 10. Because some of what he said in that was spoilery, and I gave some spoilery thoughts on it. But one part of what he said wasn't super spoilery, and I responded to it in a certain way that watching this episode that we're talking about now made me reconsider my answer. So I wanted to bring up that part of his comment and readdress it. So that initial comment on the solitary episode. Regarding the cable, I was avoiding online and in real life speculation during the original run, so this didn't even register with me as a mystery to ponder. I just assumed it was set up by Rousseau to lead people into her trap. Probably mainly because Saeed never seems to consider it again once he's been caught. So I'm skipping over a spoilery part, but basically leading into this next thing, he's saying if we assume that Rousseau didn't set up the cable as part of her trap, it would otherwise make sense that she sets traps up in that location in the hopes of catching another. If she knows that the cable's there, maybe she thinks, like, if they need to maintain it or check on it or something, like, maybe she'll catch one. Now, what I initially said in that next spoilery episode 10, was that I didn't think that she set that trap up for that reason, like in that location for that reason. It makes sense that she'd set it up near where she's at to catch food. The reason I didn't think it made a lot of sense to me that she'd be trying to catch another is because, oh wow, I can't really talk about that without getting it. I'm just now realizing I have a reason that I didn't think that made sense. I guess I'll have to talk about this more in the spoilery version for this episode. But the thing that has me now reconsidering what I initially said is that wasn't the only trap she set along this cable.
Right.
In this episode, we find out that when Hurley triggers another one, that she set up another one right alongside it, and so that does have me wondering if that was what she was actually trying to do. I can't believe that I didn't realize how little of this I could get into. I was sitting here thinking, like, oh yeah, I can talk about like all this, and I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like, I can't bring certain things up. Well, shit. All right.
Well, that going back to the cable itself, because Ben mentions the cable and maybe its origin or Saeed seemingly not being interested anymore. I felt like we talked about this, but maybe I just thought of it, on my own and we didn't discuss it. But I don't feel like Rousseau put that cable there. I feel like it's strange that they've taken it and they've followed it into the ocean. I'm sorry, into the jungle. I believe that thing goes into the ocean, and I believe that.
Well, arguably, it goes both.
Right. My curiosity though would probably lend me to go. I mean, I'm going in the ocean fishing anyway, right? I mean, I'm not free diving for long, but if I grab that cable, I'm gonna walk that cable out into the water, and then I'm gonna go down and pull myself along there and see if I can see how far out does it go. Maybe it goes out to, some type of generator or booster or something out there underwater. My curiosity would lead me out there before it lead me deeper in that jungle.
Well, but what I'm wondering is, and I there's no way to know if this crossed Saeed's mind, is like, how realistic would it be that the cable would stay close enough to the surface that you would really be able to keep sight of it,
You mean the water?
Yeah, like surely it would continue along the ocean floor.
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying. Like I'm not saying I'm going to free dive, but but maybe it only goes out 20 yards, in which you're holding on to it. You swim up, you swim back down, or swim towards the end, or whatever. Like if you were to get out there a little bit and you were to see that, like, oh, I can see this structure under the water, and maybe it's so far out, but it might be worth swimming out there and then free diving down just to see what it is. Maybe
what we had talked about along these lines was, in either direction, that cable must be attached to something interesting.
Yeah.
Either it's channeling something from out in the ocean to the island, or the opposite. And therefore, yeah, you'd be curious to know what's on either end of that cable. We now know that it becomes impossible to keep following the cable on island, like it disappears well into the ground. But yeah, your main point was you don't think that Rousseau was responsible for it, and I think that that's reasonable. We don't know what they were researching, we don't know what they were trying to do, but I can't think of anything, unless it's spoilery, for how and why they would set up a cable like that.
I think they should just cut it.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you something. Frustrated Mike, if I can't find the source, I'll make the source come to me when the cable doesn't work anymore.
That is funny. Like, yeah, like what would happen? The whole simulation would crash.
Yeah. Pixelations go away and you find out you're in a white room. That whole hatch. The hatch thing coming back into play, and the numbers on the hatch. Mm-hmm. There are things I remember.
Oh.
Yeah. Things I remember now.
Speaking of the hatch, like what I didn't mention was, like, that's the first time in a while that we've actually seen it again. It's been several episodes since we saw it. Now we see how much progress they've made in excavating the thing. They've really dug it out of the dirt, and you're kind of seeing more of this thing. Don't know if I actually have a question with that. Yeah, I mean, just any other crazy ideas for why those numbers?
It doesn't answer any questions as far as the significance of the numbers or the meaning of the numbers, but it adds a ton more credibility to just how important they are in the story. Mm-hmm. They're heard by this Navy guy. He shares that with his friend. These calamities happen. Hurley wins the lottery with them. Russo's writing them down. They're being broadcast from the island for some reason. That's why everybody's hearing them. Now they're on this hatch. They seem to be a pretty baseline touchstone purpose, to these numbers. And maybe it's foundational to the island, but they've been heard in the outside world, being pushed out from the island, and now they've spread out into the world, so to speak, and when they're used, they have some type of consequence out there, which, may be the, I don't know, the consequential reason that they're on the island to begin with. I don't know. It just seems like there's just such a, like just a web that's going out from this island, and it starts with those numbers somehow.
Well, and the thing that I really want to hone in on there is the chain of these events and how it really originates from them being broadcast. Let's assume, I think it's a reasonable assumption, I'm not saying it's a correct assumption, but whoever built this hatch and inscribed these numbers on them may or may not have had something to do with the radio tower that was transmitting them. I mean, it would certainly make sense that if both, there's some interest in the numbers, whatever. Yeah. The fact that it's that transmission being heard that one night 16 years ago that leads to both Rousseau's team crashing on the island and these people hearing it, which leads to this guy ending up in the institution with Hurley, which leads to Hurley hearing the numbers, which leads to Hurley. It all stems from them being broadcast from the island. Now, again, playing devil's advocate with whether or not this curse could be legit. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's not, and it's purely being like this is being projected onto it by her. Like Hurley's projecting this curse onto these things. The really big coincidence is that this other guy also came to that same conclusion about these numbers. Yeah. The way that I would counter that in the situation where there is no legit curse is if this guy heard them in that creepy way one night coming from the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and then he goes and he does this and he gets it right to the bean, does it kind of make sense that he would start interpreting every bad thing that happens as the result of that? And then Hurley's not dissimilar. Like, I heard these numbers. Like, I start noticing all these bad things happen after this life-changing event, me winning all this money. At first I think it's the money, but then like, oh no, wait, I got the numbers from this really creepy, weird situation where this guy just says those numbers over and over and over again. I'm just going back to the subjectivity of luck and interpreting things as bad luck instead of interpreting them as good luck. I feel like that's a point worth raising, is that like, would they have started interpreting the numbers as being cursed if they hadn't come across them in such ominous ways?
Yeah, strange circumstances. Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, the numbers with everything you're seeing, they seem to be attached to negative occurrences for sure, but contextually, right, not have anything to do with. That's not the intent of the numbers, but you're just in unfortunate situations when you come about them. Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah. Just once you start viewing things through that lens, you start to ignore the pieces of evidence that contradict that.
Yes.
However many years that Sam Toomey was around, because he had died 4 years prior, she said. So that means this was all over 12 years. And I don't know. I mean, she mentions a flood. She mentions the house burning down. She mentions that car accident. I'm sure there was more.
Yeah.
But you're talking about over a 12-year period. And like, you're telling me that there was nothing good that happened during that period.
Right.
And and Hurley, we will talk about this more as we learn more of Hurley's backstory. I mean, that was something I meant to mention earlier. Hurley was in a damn mental institution before he ever came across the numbers. It doesn't sound like he had the best luck ever prior to that.
Right. Like everything was going peachy.
Yeah. And as we learn more in future flashbacks of Hurley's, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that I can point to things that happened after he won the lottery that's like, well, that's actually a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
Said playing devil's advocate, it's an interesting, it is thematically relevant. I think that is part of why this numbers curse, or this idea of this numbers curse, is introduced. Is it goes back to one of the biggest themes of Lost, which is the nature of belief, why we believe the things that we do, and how that affects us and our perspectives, and how we interact with people who don't share those beliefs or people who do share them. I think that's everything we have, though. So, once again, 20 years ago, there was a hiatus after this episode. Basically, 4 weeks from when this is going up will be our next new podcast episode. This doesn't really affect you and I. We're going to continue recording this weekly until we're finished with the season. But yeah, for you guys, sorry, once again, another hiatus. We're replicating the experience from 20 years ago. There were a lot of breaks back then.
We'll bring you that suffering.
Yeah. Not that I'm claiming this will be as bad as waiting for a new Lost episode. But anyways, we will be back in 4 weeks for episode 19, titled Deus Ex Machina.
Hope to see you then.
I would now like to give a special thank you to the currently active donors. These include candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate number 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate number 69, Brian Phillips, candidate number 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate number 341, Hans. If you too would like to become a candidate, you can do so for as little as $1. One-time or recurring donations can be set up on Ko-fi.com/Candlepun, or patreon.com/Candlepun. A donation of any amount will get you credited in this podcast and added to the candidate wall, which will be displayed in all video versions of the episodes of this podcast from that point forward, even once you're no longer donating. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources that are used in the production of this podcast. These include Mary Mullins, Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, William McMahon, and Charlene McMahon. Until next time, namaste and good luck.
I think he's done plenty of thoughtful things. I think it escapes a lot of people, but
yeah. Well, even just giving the advice to Shannon in the last episode, or other examples. To like this video, click the thumbs up. Or, if there has been an incursion by the hostiles, click the thumbs down. To leave feedback, enter a comment below. To be notified when more videos arrive, click the circle and then select the notification bell. To view previous content from this channel, click either of the two boxes.